Welcome to Persons of Interest. I am your host, Derek Dockett. If you listen to the trailer episode, I described this podcast as featuring interesting people doing interesting things. Well, my first guest in this episode, she certainly lives up to that. Some of her accolades include Conference Player of the Year 3 straight years. She was All-American or received All-American recognition all 4 years of her college career. She was an academic All-American as well. She was Missouri State's Outstanding Female Athlete of the Year all 4 years of her college career. Think about that. Outstanding Female of the Year for Missouri State all 4 years. 15 times she was a Conference Player of the Week and 11 times Scholar Athlete of the Week. There's so much more. I can go on. And I didn't even mention what she accomplished in high school. But I will finish by saying that she was one of the top 30 finalists for the NCAA's Woman of the Year Award this past year in 2018. It's quite a resume. Some folks may know, but that is the resume of the volleyball career of Lily Johnson. She is my guest here this week on Persons of Interest. We had a great conversation that included a lot, and I've broken this into 2 parts. In this episode, part 1, Lily and I talked about her high school career, her recruiting process, and what that was like, which I thought was very interesting. We also talked about her time at Missouri State on the court as a volleyball student athlete, but also her time in classroom and how she managed time and her picking a major and those types of things. We did discuss some of her volleyball memories, and we spent a lot of time discussing other things as well. But I think that this is unique because not many people know what it's like to be a college student athlete at the Division I level, or at any level for that matter, and what it's like to have to manage your time when it comes to practice and competition and classes and homework, and even try to have a personal life. With all those volleyball accolades I mentioned earlier, there's one stat that I didn't even mention that's just as important. In college, she managed a 3.9 GPA in cell and molecular biology. I can go on and on about everything that she's done in college. And in part 2, we'll talk about what she's doing after college. She's since graduated, but you'll get more of that in part 2. But here in part 1, I'll let you hear the story straight from her. This is Lily Johnson here on Persons of Interest. As I was getting prepared to interview this young lady, I was trying to think of what we had in common, and I couldn't think of a whole lot, except for we're now both officially both Missouri State alums. We both went to high school in West St. Louis County, and that's about all I can come up with.
And we're retired Missouri Valley Conference participants. is
Participants. I like how you put that, because like me participating was way different than how you participated.
Hey, but it's another thing in common. So
true.
Throw it in there.
I'll take it. If you recognize that voice, that is the voice of Lily Johnson. She played volleyball at Missouri State University from 2014 through 2017. Wow, God, wow. It doesn't even seem like that long, but
truly, yeah, you're talking to me, right?
Well, she's going to probably make a face when I say these things, but I'm not going to say too much of it. She's probably one of the more decorated student athletes to play there, because she was All-American multiple years. She was Player of the Year, Freshman of the Year. I mean, the awards go on and on and on. But that's not even the reason why I really wanted to talk to her, because I interviewed her several times. When Lily and I talked several times when she was down there and I was working at the Missouri Valley Conference about what was happening in volleyball in the league, what was going on at Missouri State. They had some phenomenal years when she was on the team down there. But her commitment to not only volleyball, but what she has done in the classroom is another reason why, in my eyes, she's probably one of the more special people that I was able to see and cover in my time in the Valley. So first of all, Lily, thank you for setting aside the time to chat. And I guess my first question is, what's new? It's been a while since I talked to you. You got a chance to have a Thanksgiving this year, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's an honor and it's great to be able to catch up with you again. But yeah, did have Thanksgiving dinner for the first time in like 4 or 5 years. Was really weird because I ate and I was like, okay, what do we do now? And I sat down with my family and we turned on the TV and pulled up the Missouri Valley Conference tournament. So we really can't stay away, which is, I don't know if that's embarrassing or pathetic or a little bit of both. But but it was nice to be able to see some family that I hadn't gotten to see in quite some time, really, aside from just a phone call, or if they're able to ever make it to a match, when we play somewhere out of state. But yeah, it was good to come home, have like that kind of fall break, and catch up with some people and just kind of hang out instead of not being able to eat a full Thanksgiving meal because we couldn't be too full to play, the quarterfinal match, it was very nice, but definitely a change of pace.
So for those that don't know, of course, I've talked about it before. I previously worked at the Missouri Valley Conference. I was there from 2010 through January of 2018. And one unique thing about the Valley, there are several unique things, but the volleyball conference tournament actually begins on Thanksgiving night. So I was always traveling the Wednesday before up through Saturday night to handle my job responsibilities as part of the conference office. And Lily was a student athlete, so we both had the pleasure of not having Thanksgiving meal. Of course, me for much longer of a time period, but it was my first year of having Thanksgiving as well. And it's funny you say that you turned on the tournament. I did the same thing.
I was going to say, I don't even have to ask you to know you're doing the same exact thing.
I still keep tracks on things going around the Valley. Of course, as a Missouri State alum, you got to pay attention to the Bears, but
totally.
It was weird. I had the same experience where it was sort of like, I don't really know what to do on Thanksgiving anymore, because it was like, I didn't know. So me and my wife went to her family's house, and I was able to go to my family's house. And afterwards, she went Black Friday shopping. So yeah, it was good to be home and eat 2 big meals and a lot of dessert and not care about it. So I was glad you were able to do the same thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, getting back to the new normal.
Yeah. So okay, I have lots of questions, and
fire away.
I'm going to go all the way back. And these aren't anything that I was not able to ask when I was at the Valley, but I'm just sort of curious. So
sure.
I had no clue. I didn't pay attention. I don't have kids, and none of my family members, I've got a nephew that played high school basketball, but they didn't play volleyball. I know anything about locally here, the talent.
Sure.
I know the club volleyball scene is a thing here in St. Louis. But I went back and paid more attention to your bio on Missouri State's website, and you had accolades even as a high school standout at Lafayette High School. I'm just curious, how do you even end up at Missouri State? Because it seems like you may have had lots of different opportunities to go play Division I college volleyball, a lot of different places. But what made you land at Missouri State?
Yeah, definitely. It's a good question. And I one that I haven't answered in a very long time. So it's good to go back and revisit your roots, right?
Yeah.
No, but I mean, really, it's kind of weird how it all came together. I mean, recruiting these days, I mean, it's starting earlier and earlier. I mean, I thought getting letters and emails starting my freshman, sophomore year in high school was weird. And now it's just completely, they can make as many rules as they want. But the fact of the matter is, in my opinion, it's always going to start earlier and earlier as every year goes on, as things get more competitive. But I digress. But I played JV my freshman year. And I remember I was super excited, totally nervous, thought I was going to just bomb a tryout. Well, it went great. And then about halfway through my season, I got pulled up to be a swing player on the varsity team. At the time, my older sister was a senior. And so that was a really special experience, kind of getting to play on the same court as her in her last season. And then that was kind of just a segue right then and there. My sophomore year, junior, and senior was a starter all 3 years on varsity, and brought home the program's first state title, and that was awesome. And then we won 2 more after that. And then once I was done, they won 3 more. So 6 in a row, I think it was 6 or 7, which is amazing. And it was really cool to be able to be a part of that. But I think because we had such a strong team, and in my junior year, we had, myself, And at that time, I was committed to Missouri State. But even before that, it was me and then one of my friends who was going to set at Oregon, one of my friends that was going to play at Western Kentucky, which is a very strong volleyball program. We had a girl going to Auburn. We had a girl going to Ole Miss who later transferred to Mizzou. I mean, we had just our entire lineup was going somewhere D1. It was kind of crazy, especially for a public school where you don't get to do, that kind of under the table recruiting when it comes to, bringing players to your school. It's all about, where you live and if you fall into the right zone, and then, you're lucky if you end up with a good team. And I think what's interesting too is that in Springfield, the private high school thing isn't really there's Springfield Catholic and a couple of others, but that was a big difference. The volleyball is not public versus private. It's all public, which I think is cool, but, private versus public rivalries were huge. Yeah. I will never forget that. But I think because we had such a strong team, we kind of started making some noise. And, we got a national ranking. We were number 2 ranked nationally overall my junior year because we went completely undefeated in matches and in sets that year. So that was insane. So I think that kind of helped put me on the map for a lot of schools, at least. And then club, obviously, when you travel for these national tournaments, that kind of opens their eyes too as well. But fact of the matter is, while I was so fortunate to have a lot of great success with the team and individually in high school, what a lot of coaches and recruit scouts saw was that I was, just 5'10", and that was ultimately the reason why I committed to Missouri State, because from day one, Melissa Stokes and her staff had such confidence in me and my abilities, and there was never any conversation of, well, we think you could, succeed here as a 6 rotation outside hitter, but if not, you can always just go play libero in the back 3 rotations. That was never in the question. It was always, look, I'll never forget a conversation she had with me before one of their matches. I was down there to watch on a visit, and she's like, look, I'm going to be happy for you no matter where you go, but I just don't want you to sell yourself short. And that was ultimately what kind of stuck with me, because I had a lot of schools, Dayton, Arkansas, Mizzou, they were recruiting me, but being a libero was very much part of the conversation because, I had coaches telling me ridiculous things, Derek, just from your hands are too small to just you're not physical enough. It was just ridiculous reasons. I'm okay, if you're going to tell me my hands are too small, you might as well, that's a bigger insult than just telling me I'm too short. You know what I mean?
That's crazy.
It was comical, and looking back, I can laugh on it now. But it was a little bit disheartening to begin with, because I, had always been a 6 rotation outside hitter, and it's what I love to do. And I knew that moving forward, of course I could be happy anywhere as long as I'm playing volleyball, but I wanted to be an attacker. That was important to me, and kind of a lot of my identity as a player. So I didn't want to lose that. And just going to Missouri State, recruiting such a business. And, every coach has their own kind of MO as far as how they run their recruiting and how they treat their players. But, Missouri State was just always different. And everybody told me when I started to go on visits that, when you'll have a gut feeling. And I waited for that to come, and I kind of got freaked out because I was visiting, Creighton and Illinois State, actually, and Missouri State and Dayton. And I was going on these visits, and I'm kind of sitting here waiting for it to happen. And the first round, and I say that because I ended up going on a couple of return visits after that September 1 deadline went. You could talk to coaches back and forth. Well, that deadline is long gone because the rules have been updated, and I don't know what they are now. But the first round kind of came and went, and I'm well, Mom and Dad, I have no idea where I want to go. This is great. So it ended up I had top 3. And then I distinctly remember having Creighton and Missouri State on my list to go back and make a return visit to.
Oh, wow.
And I went to Missouri State first, and at that point I had been given an offer, and this is the summer before my junior year of high school. And I'd been given an offer, and I went to go watch a match, and I remember I just met so many of the incoming recruits, whether it be in my class or the class, behind me. And just something, there was that little click, it was that feeling. And just the way I gel with the incoming players and the success that was already established at Missouri State and the coaching staff. And I loved that it was close enough to home, but not too far away. It was just a great combination of all these little details. And plus, at that point, I had no idea what I wanted to study. But I knew I wanted to be involved in athletics, and they had a lot of great programs, which the program I ended up choosing, which was cell and molecular biology, was very unique to Missouri State. So I really had a great visit and super comprehensive, and I got to meet, Dan Raines and all the support staff for academics and athletics, and it really just kind of blew me and my parents away. And it took me going back there again and having that conversation with Stokes about not selling myself short that really kind of stuck out in my mind. And I remember leaving and driving back home, and in the car, I'm like, Mom and Dad, I don't know that I need to go back to Creighton. I think this is it. I think I've made up my mind. And so literally I was sitting there on 44 and Stokes after her match, and she was at dinner, I remember, with all the other staff, and I called her and told her, and she thought I was joking at first, which was funny. But no, it was a good conversation, and the rest is history. So kind of a crazy way that I ended up there, but like I said, I look back and I don't think I would have done it any differently. So I found out actually retrospectively when I had already graduated that apparently at some point in my 4 years at Missouri State, there were a couple of schools that were trying to contact my club coach actually. And I won't call them out, but some pretty big Power 5 schools that were like, hey, do you think, because at that point, like, the rules are pretty strict, and my club coach later told me, he's like, yeah, I took those messages and I just threw them out the window. He's like, nah, she's fine. She doesn't want to go anywhere. So, and the thing is like, I'm glad he didn't tell me, even if he had. There's like, loyalty is a big thing for me, and Missouri State has done so much for me, and then some. So wouldn't regret a single moment of it. But it's insane and just really eye opening to look back and see how everything kind of slowly fell into place. It's pretty remarkable.
That's so interesting for a lot of different reasons. A lot of things you just said there. I never was recruited by, I didn't play any sports, so I don't have that athletic prowess that you have. So recruiting is all foreign to me, and I know what I know just from working at the Valley and what I hear offhand and all that. And you going through that process, and first time around, no clue, and then when I think that's a lot of what I hear from people. When you'll know, kind of thing.
Which is like the most frustrating piece of advice ever. Just to insert that in there, because like I think that's different for everybody.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it was just a lot of pressure. I'm like, okay, well, how do I know what I know? What if I don't know what I know? You know what I mean?
Right.
So I found that very funny, too.
Well, and you also said at the time you didn't know what you were going to major in. And from the outside looking in, to me, I'm like, well, she must have always known that, because first of all, I had to go and look up just before I called you of what cell and molecular biology was at Missouri State. And this is coming from someone that is on the Missouri State Alumni Board. And I fashion myself as thinking I know everything I can know about Missouri State University. And like, I want to tell other kids how great a school it is. And here's a major that here's someone like I followed for forever. And like, yeah, she's got like a 3.94 whatever GPA, and she's like rocking it. We have this major? What does this major even mean?
Yeah.
You didn't know that going into, to me, that's surprising too. When did you decide on that?
So I knew, Brianne Dixon, which is my fellow co-captain my senior year, she was one of the kids that's like, I want to be a doctor. I know this, like, straight out the womb, pretty much. Like, she was always and she had a 4.0 GPA the whole way through. So, like, obviously, yes. So I had known before that she was already in the class, and I knew that was what she was going to study. And before, I was just kind of like, well, I don't know, that sounds cool, but, when I was, okay, rewind. Coming out of high school, I was always that kind of person where, like, I always, and whether it be athletics, academics, whatever, my mantra was, and kind of still is, like, if you set the bar low, you can never be disappointed. So, and by that, it sounds terrible, but what I mean by that is, like, I was always worried that I wasn't going to be able to achieve something. And I was like, well, if I just expect the worst, it couldn't be that bad if I fail, right? And I remember hearing the rumors like, oh, cell and molecular biology is so hard. It's like one of the hardest majors at Missouri State. And I was just like really freaked by that. And I'm like, well, these people in college are saying that, like, I've never taken a college class. Like, what if I can't handle it? You know what I mean? So a lot of second guessing. And I went into my first semester as a freshman, just taking the general education courses and, just kind of getting my feet wet. And I took a introduction to biomedical sciences class, and it was kind of one of those weed out classes where, like, you either pass with flying colors or, like, you fail, like, hardcore, And I did really well, and I really enjoyed it. And that was when I was kind of like, well, maybe I will. I was kind of trying to find every other way to avoid like majoring in that, because like I was scared. So I was like, maybe I'll major in education and teach science. That'll show him. And so I took my first class in education. And I'm like, I cannot do this. So I was like, no way. Like I don't know what about it was. It just wasn't for me. And that's like, that was like perfect like textbook example. When like that was not for me. So eventually I talked to Bree a lot, and I'm like, you know what, Lily, you need to stop being a wimp and just go for it and see what happens. And so it was my second semester where I officially, about a couple weeks in, where I officially declared that I was going to go cell and molecular biology, and didn't really look back from there. And I just it was at that point where I'm like, you know what, like, my whole life, like even in high school, like I kept the 4.0 in high school, which isn't like that impressive, I guess, because most kids can get through high school.
Impressive to me. It's impressive to me.
Well, thank you. But I was just like, you know what? I've heard, how is it any different from someone, in high school telling you, well, this teacher's so hard. And then, every time I go in and just crush it, because I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to let that even be a factor. I'm just going to learn the material and let it fly and see what happens. And I kind of just adopted the same philosophy when it came to tackling that major. And having Bree, we took a lot of the same classes on the same timeline once I had caught up to her, because she started off already doing that. But by the time our senior year came around, we were taking the same classes, and it was easy to have kind of an accountability partner and someone to study with and push you, and especially through all the hard, like 500 level, upper level classes in that major. So it ended up being a good thing, and I'm glad I took the leap of faith and wasn't a baby about it anymore. But it's kind of a funny story how I got to it, because I was like, well, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. And I think that they say, what's the statistic? They say a typical undergrad student changes their major like 6 or 7 times. Well, I was creeping up to that level. I was very close. So, but yeah, like I said, same with the recruiting aspect. I wouldn't change it one bit, because it was honestly an amazing education, and set me up perfectly for what I'm trying to do in postgrad now. So I'm very happy with my decision.
So, and that's one of the things I want to get into. Before I do, I pulled up Missouri State's website on cell and molecular biology. These are the top 4 bullet points that are listed on the site.
Okay.
It says it's one of the fastest growing biological fields of study. Our classes are sequenced to continually build and reinforce your knowledge in a variety of different biomedical areas. You will spend extensive time gaining experience in our laboratories, which are furnished with state-of-the-art equipment. And through a combination of service learning and volunteer opportunities, you will enhance your classroom knowledge and gain preparation for your career. What does one do? And I know you say you working on postgrad, but like, what does one even do with a cell and molecular biology degree? Like, I see lots of biology and like, I'm reading lots of big words on this webpage: biochemistry, genetics, DNA technology, cell physiology, cancer biology. Like, what does one do with a degree with cell and molecular biology?
Yeah, right. And it's a good question, because people are like the number one reaction when people are like, oh, what'd you study? And part of me in the back of my mind, I'm like, I'm going to sound so like pretentious when I say this.
Well,
like, it's not like, if you just say biology to somebody, they're like, oh, yeah, like, all right, that sounds terrible. They're like, cool. But then when you're like, oh, I studied cell and molecular biology, they just look at you with like this, like, it's like half disgust and half just like boredom. Like, it's just like terrible. So,
and in my case, it sounds really hard, by the way. It just sounds really, really hard.
Sure. Well, the thing is like the faculty are phenomenal at Missouri State, and the support system, the advisors, they are so awesome. And while it is a very challenging major, they make it rewarding, and why so many kids are continuing to commit to that major and field of study. But the beauty of it is that it's pretty much a springboard for anything you want to do, because you're reading off some of the classes. It gives you such a broad foundation of knowledge to where you're exposed to brand new areas of study that you may want to go and get a master's in, or study for a PhD that you didn't even know existed before you came into the program. But it also kind of allows you, if you want to go to med school, or if you want to go, in my case, to physician assistant school, or if you want to go to dental school, it gives you all of the prerequisite, you tick all the boxes, because a lot of these programs say, hey, if you want to apply here, not only do you have to have these prerequisite courses done, but you also have to take an entry test. So like, for example, for medical school, it's the MCAT. For dental school, it's the DAT. PA school is either the MCAT or the GRE. So you're having to take these prerequisite courses, but they also set you up so well to thrive and do really well on these entry exams so that you can ultimately get into a great program. But yeah, I think that, and a lot of kids actually, when there were a lot of friends of mine that they were like, oh, I want to go pre-med, because most kids are pre-med when they start the major until they really learn and research more about it. But a lot of kids end up staying on and actually getting their master's in cell and molecular biology, which more power to them, because that is like one of the courses is like DNA recombinant something, and the lab is literally like 6 hours long, and it's like the most insane kind of stuff. Like I thought I was like next level, but like, no, these kids are like absolutely just brainiacs. I mean, it's a lot of lab work, very intensive, but like I said, like that's what you expect of an education, right, at the college level. So lots of different avenues you can pursue. But the thing is, like, people are also like, well, why not just do regular biology? And there's actually kind of a funny little like unspoken conflict between the CMB majors, which is what I did, and then the biology kids, because like they claim that each thinks they're better than the other. And I think it's really funny because I'm like, whatever, we're all in school dying anyway, so it doesn't matter. but a lot of the bio kids are like pre-vet, animal science kind of things, because you get that whole plant side and like in like ecosystems and things like that, versus cell and molecular biology. You're taking cardiopulmonary physiology, and you're taking, biology of cancer, things like that you were reading off. So that's kind of the difference. It's a more of an emphasis on the human side of things and body systems. And of course, like setting you up for, medical school and things of the like.
So you're doing all these, you said you like some of the classes have a 6 hour lab or something like that.
One I did not do. That was for the master's. But I did take, most classes when you get up to the junior, senior level, the labs are about 3 hours. So, and then you have to do a ton of prep and research outside of that. So it's a big commitment. And
you're also a student athlete at the same time.
That's true. Don't give me too much credit.
No,
it's because
seriously, like just time management. How did you figure out time management? Like,
sure. So like really the first battle is just making sure that you can find, so like a 3 hour lab, that's a pretty big chunk. And granted, it's most times only once a week, but you have to find, there's only a certain number of offerings. So you got to be able to get into the right one. And then also there's granted, like for example, I had to take my last 500 level. It was like molecular biology. BMS 525 was the course code. And if I was on track to do what everybody else was doing, I would have taken it the fall of my senior season. And my advisor was like, look, I don't think that's a good idea for you. You shouldn't be missing that much class. So the advisors, fortunately, there's an increasing number of student athletes that are CMB majors. So the advisors have this experience. They can advise you best on when not to take a certain class, or they kind of know how that lines up with athletics. So that's a huge advantage, because a lot of majors don't have that. A lot of schools don't have advisors that really care at all about that kind of thing. So that's one thing I'm lucky for. But the other thing is, like I said, scheduling, making sure that the schedule lines up, praying that you're lucky enough to find a lab that doesn't, conflict with other classes or practice. And from then on, really, it's just about, for me, it always was just getting into a routine and making sure that, week to week, you're setting the same list of priorities and, getting your work done on time, because nothing is worse than coming back from a road trip where you had like an 8 hour bus ride overnight and got home at 3 a.m. and then slept till 10 or 11 or noon or even later sometimes, and then waking up on a Sunday and having all this work to do. That's a huge bummer. So really just making sure you're staying diligent. And while it's so tempting to want to come home on a Tuesday, Wednesday and just crash at your apartment and eat dinner and do nothing, you really can't do that all the time, So it's kind of you're always, in a way, having to be on, if it's not practice and playing well, it's, school and paying attention in class and taking good notes, and then, coming back and doing the homework. And then for me and Brienne, what we ended up doing is that, we actually both took organic chemistry too when we were in fall, so in season. So we each bought iPads and like tripods and gave them to either a fellow student athlete who was in the class with us who wasn't in season, or made fast friends with people that we trusted with, an iPad and gave it to them and had them record, their Thursday, Friday lectures, and then meet up with them Sunday, get the iPad back, and then take all those notes that night. So it was sometimes tricky to kind of finagle your way through some classes and figure out the best to actually learn the material and not just, blindly copy notes from a friend and not really know what the heck you're doing. But establishing your routine was first and foremost like the most important thing. And it also helps when you have, 15, 16 other girls that are, maybe different majors, but also, struggling through the same battle. So that helps too. Again, all about accountability and making sure that not only you, but your teammates are, staying on top of things. That really helps a lot. And our team put a big emphasis on academic success. So I think knowing that we all wanted that campus team GPA award that's very coveted, that made a difference too. So just kind of about the mentality and then energy and being able to get enough sleep to to do it all in one day's work,
I'm glad you've hit on so many things that aren't even volleyball related, because I haven't even gotten there yet. But you mentioned Brianne Dixon, who graduated. She was a senior the same year you were, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you mentioned going through the recruiting process and how being connected to the incoming, the same people that are being recruited coming in with you or the class after you, and how that mattered. And it shows on the volleyball court of how you guys, were a great team and you knew each other. You have classes together. You're doing all these things. I mean, that's obviously the first part of being a team is, camaraderie and all those things. And you said that played a role in your decision because you got to know them. When it comes down then to actually volleyball, explain how that even takes it to the next level, because you guys had a lot of success on the court.
Definitely.
Probably because you had such good camaraderie and you knew how the other one might be thinking. Just talk a little about that, just how the actual team atmosphere was for you 4 years at Missouri State.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was really cool because by the time my senior year came around, our senior class was, Brianne Dixon, Lauren Boone, and Lindsay Wright. And at that point, all four of us had known each other for about like 5, 6, 7 years. So it wasn't like, first day we show up to report for preseason freshman year and we're like, deer in headlights and meeting each other for the first time. Like I had played club with Lindsay back in St. Louis, and Lauren I had met at a summer camp my junior year. So like I had known all these guys for a long time and just going to matches as recruits and, getting that time to bond. So by the time we came in, it's tough being a freshman. And the four of us, we were friends, but at that point it hadn't been too long of knowing each other. So we're still trying to figure things out and grind through it together. And I would say the difference in team culture from our freshman year to our senior year was enormous because we had just had that experience and, camaraderie build year by year. And as you go through your 4 years, you kind of figure out by the time you're a senior what you liked and disliked about what the senior leaders and the team leaders did before you, and you kind of get to build your own destiny according to that. And by the time we were all seniors, we were super close, a very tight group, and we had established a culture very early on, like all the way back when spring season had started before our new freshmen had come in. Enforcing like, hey, we're going to work hard. We're going to do well in the classroom. We're going to have each other's backs, and those are the rules, and don't break them. So that was absolutely huge. And then on the court, it was like once we had established that kind of mentality in practices and out in public and in the classroom, it was like playing on the court was just kind of second nature. It was like you knew in a really weird, innate way, like where everybody was. And like, I got to the point where like, I knew when I was or wasn't going to get set because I could just like, and you're going to go crazy. Like you could just feel it, like I could see it like in when Danny Mesa and Emily Orlando are our setters. And like, I knew them so well that I'm like, I can tell what she's doing. I know I'm not going to get this ball. So I better get my butt over and cover Lindsay on the slide. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a really kind of, remarkable thing to sports, and I think it doesn't just apply to volleyball; it applies to all team sports. And it just really was like in the tough situations, it made it so much easier to trust each other and to know that everybody was on board and nobody was giving up no matter what the point deficit was. Like everybody was, in it for the long haul together. And, looking back at years before, we had still been successful, but I think that was definitely a missing ingredient as far as, taking us to the next level. And, I find it very ironic that my freshman year I came in and, Illinois State had that legendary team of like 6-7 seniors and they went, 18-0 in conference. And then I saw that and, we got beat by Illinois State in the semifinals of the NBC tournament. And it was a really close 5-set match. Actually, so we played them 3 times total that season. 2 of the 3 times we took them to 5 and lost. And we were one of the few teams in the conference that actually came closest to giving them a conference loss. And I remember just how disappointed I was in that year and just devastated, and watching the selection show from my dorm room alone, because my roommate was gone, just how that empty kind of feeling was, and wanting that for our team. And then, 3 years later, I'm having my senior season and we're that 18-0 team. It was just really, really bizarre kind of full circle stuff. But no way I would have wanted to do it with any other group. And I don't think we could have done it with any other group, honestly. I mean, the 4 of us seniors, we were all on the same page. And then, our junior class, sophomore class, and the freshmen that came in just totally adopted that immediately. And I'm so proud that they did that, because especially, like I said, it's freshmen. It's hard to kind of gain your bearings as you come in, and we were throwing a lot of them and expecting a lot of everybody to kind of pull their weight day in and day out. And sometimes that's hard as a student athlete. Sometimes you just show up to practice and you don't have it,
Yeah.
But like I said, that kind of thing of having each other's backs really comes into play there, where you're like, okay, well, so-and-so's not having a great day, then I got to step it up and, do it for both of us. So we had that it factor, you know what I mean? It was a totally different dynamic, just kind of a sort of magic that you can't really put into words or put your finger on, even though I just kind of tried in a way. But yeah, very special. And I would definitely attribute at least half, if not greater percentage of our success my last year to that relationship that, we all had as seniors and with the coaching staff and with the other players.
Your memory is impeccable, because I don't remember at all 5-set matches, Missouri State, Illinois State. So I went back to the website and looked, and you nailed it. The Illinois State, you guys took them to 5 and lost at normal.
I think it was our first conference match. We hosted them. They beat us in 3.
Yeah, they beat you in 3.
And then we went to their place.
Yep, and you lost in 5. And then in Cedar Falls that year was the conference tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
And the reason I remember that so well is that there was I think it was 12, 13, 12, 14, something. And I hit a ball down the line, and the ball was clearly in. And super controversial call. Line judge called it out, and that set point or 1 or 13, and then it ended. The match was over by then. So and I remember the head of officials. I don't think I'm supposed to know this, but the head of officials came up to Stokes after the match, and he was like, "I was sitting right on the sideline. That ball was in," and that just makes my blood boil, because I'm like, I'd rather you not tell me that. I don't want to know that, but. But again, like I said, it gave us that hunger, and kind of, obviously it's stuck in my mind. It still does to this day. So, imagine as a senior in your last season, having all these memories from, whether it be that match or, making a miraculous comeback when you're hosting the NBC tournament against Wichita State and then losing anyway. It's just one thing after another, and that's the beauty of sports. It gives you an internal motivation to, go the extra mile even when you don't want to.
See, you bring up all these things, and I wasn't even going to hit on some of them, but you're jogging my memory. But the tournament in Springfield against Wichita State, that was, probably one of the most drama-filled excitement matches. So for folks that don't know, so one of the responsibilities I had at the Valley was, taking pictures, social media, all that stuff. And I always try to be at the right place at the right time to capture the moments. And here we are at the volleyball championship in Springfield. We got a 5-set thriller going on, because it's going to end after 5, because they only go to 5. And I don't even remember. I should go back, try and track down, go to the website here and see.
It was
how that finished.
It was the longest match in an NBC tournament.
Yes.
And championship history, I believe.
Yes. And
almost 3 hours.
Let's see here. Recap. I'm trying to remember what the score was, but it was a 5-set thriller. And it was an 18-16 in the 5th set.
Oh, God.
And so, I mean, it was a battle back and forth. And you guys were up. And of course, they came back to win. But I'm sitting here on the sideline thinking, okay, I got to get this picture of whoever wins celebrating because I want to be at the right spot at the right time because someone's going to be celebrating in a pretty unique way. And I always try to get those kind of pictures and not knowing what's going to happen. I'm like, I need to get back to my computer and tweet something, but I can't because I don't want to miss the moment. And of course, Wichita State wins. But still, I think you've said this before to me in interviews that I've recorded for the Valley. You guys always had this sort of mutual respect for the Shockers when they were in the league because of the competition, because of the level play. I think even between the coaches, Stokes and Chris Lamb, they always had that thing too. Like it's always interesting behind the scenes. Coaches love to share notes and all that stuff. So there's always that mutual respect. But of course, a heartbreaker none the least. But you've played sports, you played volleyball for a majority of your life. You've been down that road before, so you know how to handle it. But in that situation where you're that's one of those, I don't want to say demons, but one of those things you're trying to overcome. You want to win conference, you want to win conference tournament, you want to beat the rival kind of thing. In that situation, is that just gut wrenching there? Because you guys did get a bid. You did get an at-large to the NCAA tournament that year.
I think, wasn't that the year that 4 Valley teams won? Because SIU had an awesome year too, and so did you and I.
Yeah.
Was that the year? Yeah,
I believe so.
Yeah, we did.
So, I mean, but still in that moment, you had success that year, but you just didn't get that one. I'm sure you probably want really bad. Do you look back on that now like, or you're like, you know what? It's just it's a game. You go through with it.
I wish I had that kind of, mature wisdom and insight, but it still makes me want to throw up when I think about it. No, but I mean, and it was cool because, I still very vividly remember all the emotions I felt during that last set, especially, and remembering just like when it was 14-11, I was like, dang it, just thinking
just
like
one more point and you got it.
I know. And then we, started coming back and we're like, what? And then I remember getting excited and then thinking in my head, Lily, you can't get too excited because this is Wichita State and the craziest things always happening at Wichita State. And then, we lose it. But I think, and you kind of touched on this earlier, I think when you sign up for college athletics or being an athlete in general at any level, what you don't realize in the invisible ink is written, you will also suffer lots of mental and emotional trauma in a negative way. And like that you're signing up for the gut-wrenching losses and you're signing up for the hard days of practice and the not so glorious things, or the not so beautiful side of volleyball and athletics as a whole. Sure. So, I mean, to an extent, and you do wish this never happened to you, of course, but I don't think there's a single athlete out there that can go and say, hey, I've never had a disappointing moment in my career at all,
right.
That I can remember. So, yeah, I'm one of those people that, carries the mantra, everything for a reason. And when it comes to athletics, at least, and I think that, again, just made the last year, all the more sweet, and just knowing that all the hard work we had put into it, failing and then succeeding and then failing and succeeding and then working hard to improve and then having, the year that we did at the very end. And really despite not having won the tournament title, my sophomore and junior year, I mean, like we still had great seasons.
Right,
so there were
absolutely.
things to still be excited about.
Yes.
But it's hard to end on that and then have to go a week later into the tournament and then just be on again and forget all about it. But again, I think all the bumps in the road made the end destination all the more sweet and very worth it. And something that I can look back on today, and I'd be proud regardless. But it's something you're just a little bit extra proud of. You know that you put in the time and developed a culture and kind of left your mark and left a legacy that's hopefully going to be remembered for a very long time from now. You
certainly did that. In your senior year, you guys go 28-6 overall, 18-0 in conference play. Jumping into your senior year, my first question is not in your control at all, but of course, conference realignment happens. Wichita State leaves. The Valley's just always had outstanding volleyball, and Northern Iowa, Illinois State, you guys,
right? Wichita
State, they leave. So like that's one of your rivals going there.
Yeah.
What's your thought when you hear about that? Because sitting in the conference office, it's a whole different reaction of what's going on.
I'm sure.
I never know like what the student athletes themselves are thinking. Like, oh, they're leaving. Like, what's up with that? Like, what's your thought when you find out Wichita State's not in the conference anymore?
A lot of other athletes in different sports, like a lot of my friends in basketball and, you know, tennis and whatever, they were like, well, aren't you guys excited because now you'll have a better shot at winning? And I'm like, are you even an athlete for asking that question? Like,
you want to beat the best. Yeah.
Yeah. Like for me, I'm like, I want to revenge, you know, the past couple of years. And the whole team that I spoke to was pretty much of the same opinion. Like we were kind of ticked because we're like, hey, I mean, we're about to, like, we knew what we had going into our last season. And we're like, hey, we're about to have like a really good team. So we would kind of like for you to stay so we can show you that. And, you know, hope, and if, you know, it came to be, you know, playing them again in the title match in the conference tournament. But, I was not upset. Like I wasn't distraught over it. Like I understand things have to happen, but, you know, I was bummed. And again, you want to play the best, and they're a great addition to the conference RPI wise. And, they make what is Missouri Valley Conference play the drama that it is, you know, like the huge upsets and, you know, the crazy 5-setters and, you know, they make it fun. So, it was sad to see him go. And the people that, when I had those questions, like, well, aren't you excited that now you'll probably win? I was like, do you even know how good UNI is, how good Illinois State's going to be? Like, absolutely. Drake was in my 4 years, that was when Drake has really become now what Drake volleyball is. And, you know, Bradley this past year, at least, really on an upswing now. So I'm like, yeah, I mean, you'd think that, but everybody else is kind of really hitting their stride now. So no, I at no point was excited because I thought that, oh, well, we'll win now. You know, I was like, really, if anything can happen now because Valpo comes in. You know, Valpo just came off a ridiculous season this past year, but even in my, you know, junior year, or wait, were they just there for the
your senior year?
Yeah. You know, they were making some noise as a, you know, first year conference member. So, I mean, and they'll only continue to do so. So I'm like, you know, no, it makes no guarantees because everyone's still going to be bringing it to you, you know, and all the more reason it's almost like with them leaving, it was like more attention was put on us and, you know, UNI and Illinois State. So it was like we had even more eyes on us and even bigger targets. So, it was a bummer. We were upset about it, but I'm not sure how. I would be interested to hear how other Valley teams felt about it because for us, it was definitely like a shoot kind of moment, you know?
Sure. So that year you guys go 18-0 your senior year. I'm looking at the results from that year in conference play. The first conference match against Illinois State was a 5-setter that you won. Because you won them all because you won 18-0. But you had a 5-setter against Illinois State at Illinois State. You had a 5-setter. You had a 5-setter at Drake. And you had a 5-setter versus Bradley in Springfield. After that,
even scarier.
After that, they were all either sweeps or 3-1s. Is there tons of pressure when you go, oh my God, we're 5-0, we're 10-0, we're 17-0? Like,
sure.
What is that like when you're like, oh my gosh, are we like? Do you think about that? Like, be honest now, because you're not on that team anymore.
Yeah. I'm laughing because just like that is looking back. I laugh because I'm like, how did we not feel pressure than what we did? I mean, maybe some people did, but for me, I always tried to compartmentalize things in my head to where I was like, all right, it's Monday, new week, 2 matches, let's go 2-0, let's go. You know what I mean? Sure. Like it wasn't like, well, we're 8-0, we got to go 10-0. You know what I mean? Like I was a very devil's in the details kind of person. So I was just like, you know what, it's black and white, let's take it point by point, match by match, beat this team, and move on. You know, I'm sure there are some people on the team that probably felt otherwise. It was something we kind of tried to avoid speaking about because
so you did like sort of do the unspoken,
right? Like Stokes would never go. Like we have a whiteboard for our practices, like, and she would always write the practice plan and write like reminders and things and details about the upcoming road trip and whatnot. And it was never like she would write 15-0 in big letters on the board. She would never do that, you know, and you know her, I know you know her well. So like, that's totally out of her personality as a coach and as a person too. But yeah, it was just kind of week to week. We were just like, okay. But the reason I said that those 5-setters are scary is because in practice and, you know, when things are going well and you're about to sweep a team or, you know, go 4 and win in 4, you're totally fine. You know, it's just like, yeah, okay, great, we did it. But like, I vividly, the Drake match at Drake that went 5 was insane, because we're on track to beat him in 4. We run out of subs. Jerry Etos, who is the shortest person on our roster, who's like 5'1", I think, is playing in the front row. It was a totally bizarre finish to that set, and we were just like, shoot, this is going 5. And once you get to a 5th set, for me, that's kind of when I had it a little bit creepy in the back of my mind, like, oh, geez, this could really, you know, this could really destroy something that we've been working for all season. But then, you know, the whistle blows and your adrenaline goes. And for me, it was just like, all right, well, let's make sure it doesn't happen. And the Bradley, I think the scariest of all was Bradley at home that went 5, because I think that was the first time I had ever seen us have kind of a mental lapse where I didn't recognize the team that was playing on my side of the court. And that's a scary feeling, because I just like, this is totally out of our character. We're not playing with the same fire, same intensity. And it wasn't even, a lot of people were like, oh, well, did you just underestimate Bradley? And I'm like, no, like that's one thing that I will hang my hat on about Missouri State volleyball, is that our coaching staff always has something positive and something to scare us with in our scouting reports. You know, like they're never like, hey, you know, don't worry about this one, we're not going to watch film. It's always like, you guys better come in here and take notes, because if you don't watch out for this, they're going to blow you up here. You know what I mean? So we were never a team that was taking people for granted, or, you know, looking ahead to a Saturday match before we even played Fridays. And I think that's super important. And I think that is a healthy kind of culture to establish. And I think all teams should have that kind of culture. And I know it's not always that case, but I think it's very important for just having a winner's mentality. But for Bradley, it was just like something was different. And we were in our 5th set, and I remember we were down. Like, I think it was another situation where it was like 14 to something that we had, 14-12 maybe. And I'm just like, this is terrible. Like, we are about to lose on our home court in my senior season, blow the streak, you know? And we inched our way back. And I remember at some point we subbed in a girl who hadn't had much playing experience, you know, on the grand stage. And I was so nervous because I knew we were going to set her. And I'm like, this could go terrible or it could go great. Like, I'm scared. And she hit the ball. I was playing a middle back. She hit the ball, and one of their players dug it, and she hit it so hard. I mean, this girl had an arm, like she could pound the ball. Hit it so hard that the girl dug it. It came back over on our side. I'm sprinting to our back line, our end line, to make sure that ball was going out. I watched it all the way back. You can even see it on ESPN3, because the highlight is on our highlight film, I think, at some point. And I watched it semi-recently, and I laugh whenever I watch it, because I ran so fast. I'm like, this ball better be out, because I'm not losing on a point like this. And we came back and we edged it out. I have no idea how. But the pressure, I think, in those moments was kind of rearing its ugly head. But in practice, we had a very healthy sort of mentality. And I again, that's something hard to deal with. And for me, I'm fortunate, because same thing I told you back my junior year of high school, we went 40-0 in matches, 80-0 in sets. Yeah. And that was a question I got a lot too. And granted, it's on such a smaller stage when you're in high school, but I kind of had a little bit of that experience in dealing with something like that, because that's a very unique situation. And so I credit that a lot too for how composed I probably felt during a lot of it. But for, you know, some of the new players and freshmen and whatnot, I don't know what the mentality was. But for me, my goal was just to try to stay as composed and nonchalant and relaxed about it as I could, so that, you know, no one else freaked out, you know, or at least try to minimize the nerves. But there were some questionable moments where it definitely could have slipped out of our grasp, and that is, again, the beauty of collegiate athletics, right? So
between high school and college, you didn't do a whole lot of losing. So, like, especially that senior year when you guys didn't lose a conference game. I mean, you go through just you run through the conference season and the 2 conference tournament matches against Indiana State and Northern Iowa that year. And then, of course, you get to the NCAA tournament and you guys get a tough, I'll just ridiculous draw with Michigan State, who's ranked.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were like 12, 15, something like that. I mean, I know they were like, they were very, very good. And that's just a tough draw.
We were the only quad that had 3 top 25 teams in it, which was so getting started.
Yeah,
but.
of all of that, and that's literally my point. Like, of all the things you do, and you play the regular season to prove yourself, and the Valley's unique where they have a conference tournament, and not a lot of conference tournaments in volleyball aren't a thing for folks that follow. Like, there's a lot of them that don't have it. There's some that do have it, of course. And there's always the debate of having a conference tournament in the Valley and things like that. But you hope that at that point it's the time to show what you have and to help your seeding in the tournament. Of course, you guys get sent to Omaha, and your season ends first round is NCAA tournament against Michigan State. I mean, not many people end their athletic careers with the win, and it just doesn't happen all that often, and especially in college. Sure. Like a lot of folks aren't playing professional sports after that. I mean, people always think, I'm going to go pro. I'm in a long way asking, like, you did so much winning, and then to have it sort of quote unquote end, on the collegiate level with the way that it did, eating you up inside still, or you just sort of like, you got to know how to handle that. Yeah,
I think a little bit of both. We were disappointed in the draw. I mean, when we first saw it, it was just kind of like, we didn't make a big deal out of it. Stokes didn't make a big deal out of it, but I could tell we were all watching the selection show together, and instantly, because I didn't follow much of the Big Ten or Michigan State at all, really. Sure. And as soon as I saw the name up on the screen, I could tell in her face she was not pleased.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of I wish I hadn't seen it, but to me, it didn't change the mentality. I was still going to go for it, and I still believe that we could do it. But I think it was tough because I just think, now with seeding being, such an emphasis on regional relevancy, to cut costs of, like, the NCAA paying for travel for teams. Mm-hmm. No offense, I think that's really dumb because I think we maybe could have avoided a situation like that. And, I get it in some situations, it works well, but I think that's one case where it's just like, really? Like, you really thought that was a good idea? And I think we kind of, drew the short end of the stick a little bit. And that's all the excuses that I'm going to make there, because we did play pretty poor in that first round. Granted, Michigan State did have 6-7 seniors, and they were absolutely on fire. I mean, I'm not going to just say it was all us that was just giving the match, because they played amazing.
Yeah.
But I think we prepared as best we could, and we knew what we were up against, and I think it just got to a point where they were really feeling it, and we were just like couldn't get in the rhythm. And so I remember. I have a really weird memory. Like, I remember the last point and just like an ending, and I was just like it wasn't quite the same feeling as losing to Wichita State in the MVC championship, because that was like we had it and then it was taken away from us, and in this case it was like all match long we were never leading, we were never the favorites to win that match. And that's a whole new kind of feeling, because it's just like you just feel like just disappointed, and it's just a whole new ball game of like feelings. And
in that season you guys didn't have much of that.
Oh yeah, definitely. So it was hard. Yeah, that was a harsh reality to come to after, and I'm sure people expected us to give a better fight than we did. I remember running back to the locker room, and I passed my dad in the stands, and I was like, as soon as that happened, I had to like really fight to keep it together, because like my whole family, like our like phrase is like, there's no crying in volleyball, like ever, period. Like, you do not cry. Like, you lose in anything, you don't cry. That's just how it works. But ending a career is a very unique experience.
Sure.
When we got back to the locker room, it was a very emotional, couple of minutes. We were there for like half hour, an hour maybe, and that was tough, because it was just like, it was very bittersweet, because we were so proud of what we had built, and we all knew that we'd worked so hard and that we deserved a better outcome than what we got, and despite all that, though, it was just like lots of being proud of what we had done, but just wanting more for the team that we had, So just kind of came to an end too soon, which all good things must come to an end. I understand that, but yeah, and then I think about it from time to time. It's one of the ones I try not to revisit too frequently, one of those memories, but good to kind of keep in the back of your head to keep you humble. And, it's just part of the story of your career. So like I said, it's got to come to an end eventually. So one chapter closes, another one opens.
And there you go. Part 1 with Lily Johnson there. Thanks so much to her once again for her time. Loved getting those stories from her because, as we mentioned in that discussion, I knew what I knew from the outside, but to get it from her in retrospect and have her talk about some of these stories, the things that she went through and what she remembers was a fantastic listen. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Part 2 will be coming up. You'll hear about what's next for her, what 2019 and the future holds for her, and what role volleyball may or may not play in it, what her plans are after college now that she's graduated. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And episode 2 will be on the way very shortly, so be on the lookout for that. If you have any suggestions, comments, feedback, whatever it might be, please feel free to shoot me a tweet at DDocket on Twitter. Really appreciate the feedback. I'm hoping that this podcast has some legs and I can maintain it. I have a lot of guests that I want to track down and have these similar kinds of conversations with. So I really appreciate all the support and feedback that you might be willing to share. So thanks so much for listening to Persons of Interest.